Hello all, I hope you are all well in these extraordinary times. I'd like to welcome you all to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena where we're hosting you today. In this special arena, we're going to be discussing wealth management and what the knock-on and unexpected effects will be of COVID-19. Joining us today, I always get this wrong. April, are you in New York or New Jersey?
Well, I'm on the border. So I'm actually located in in New Jersey with the view I showed you of New York.
Right, well, April is, you're my go-to kind of encyclopedia for all things wealth management. By the way, how are you finding you've got a pretty decent view of New York City, but from what we've seen over here in the UK, New York looks kind of bonkers.
New York is kind of bonkers, and second of all, New Jersey is the second worst state. And as I showed you the bridge, it's just due to the number of commuters and really close proximity between the states, so people are traveling back and forth. So the numbers yesterday looked slightly better, but nothing's really changing too much. So we're hoping that things really improve in the near future.
Yeah, we'll get through this. And joining me as well, we've also got Nicolai from innovation platform Nucoro. How are you finding lockdown, Nicolai?
Yeah, so we have an office in Madrid actually. So and in Madrid and Spain was, I think, 1 or 2 weeks ahead of everything that happened here in the UK. I'm here in the UK in London. So we got kind of a preview of things to come, and also actually I think we went into remote work already a bit before the situation here in the UK changed. It's okay. I mean, I think a lot of other people have it much harder than we do, so I'm really not complaining. I'm in the office today because I go in every other day to check on the mail and stuff, which is why I get out of the house at least. That's good.
Exactly. Is it? By the way, how are you finding the whole home office setup? Because it's always interesting having a bit of an insight into people's lives, seeing the offices behind them.
Yeah, I mean, we had to set up. Actually, for us being a firm that's 3 years old or something, it wasn't quite that much of a change. Everybody is ready to go remote. We work remote quite a bit actually. Anyway, we have these 3 offices where we do a lot of video calls. For us, it wasn't that much of a change. Of course, now not being able to get together and share ideas in front of each other, that's the tricky part. How do you replicate that? We do daily stand-up with everyone. We just get together and talk about what's on Netflix and what everybody has not been doing, basically. So we do a bit of socializing. We try to replicate that online as well. But for me, that's clearly the part I miss the most, just being around everybody in the office.
Absolutely. Well, I want to let's turn back the clock a bit. Let's turn back the clock to around sort of January time, which I think April was when I saw you at Paris Fintech Forum. What were the biggest concerns for wealth managers pre-corona, and do you think people still need to focus on these? So back in January, what was the biggest concern for people working in wealth management?
So yes, I remember those lovely days where we were in Paris drinking champagne with not a care in the world, and looking at all the different wealth techs at Paris Fintech Forum. And I think pre-corona, what most wealth managers were thinking about is probably growing their book of business, staying in touch with clients as much as they can, taking a look at some new technologies, but not probably acting on them, but just being up to date on them. I think that most advisors and wealth managers were just plugging along as business as usual before COVID-19 really became the master.
Absolutely. And Nicolai?
Yeah, I think there's always these two sides. There's like what wealth managers are concerned about, and then probably what they should be concerned about. And those are not always the same element, or the same points, I guess. We've done a bit of research into this a while ago, and I don't, of course, now that the current situation has changed the immediate things you probably should be worried about. But generally, I think there's 3 main points. It's the changing expectations of the clients around, the seamlessness and the digital offerings, where I think it's 2/3 are unhappy with what they currently see at their current provider. Then within firms, we have a rather high resistance to technology adoption or digital adoption, and actually private banks and wealth managers, they're chronically behind when it comes to investments in technology and innovation. And then there's the quite low, I think quite low brand affiliation or loyalty of clients actually, especially in the high net worth space, which is what I found very surprising when we did this research, where I think it's only 1/4 of high net worth clients that are actually recommending their current provider to a peer. So these are definitely the things that wealth managers should be worried about or should be concerned about. If they always are, I think it's a different question.
I remember a couple of years ago I was involved in a lot of video production on this, basically looking at how different generations kind of view wealth management. And obviously we've got a younger generation coming in, receiving more wealth, and the things that you would almost expect, what things that their parents wanted are not the same things that they want.
I was just going to go back to some of the points Nicolai made because, it's important. You asked a question of what were they thinking about and what are they thinking about now? I saw a meme that was sort of funny, not funny, that was, who's leading digital adoption at your firm? Is it the COO, CTO, or COVID-19? And, literally it's COVID-19 leading digital adoption. So particularly wealth management. I saw some statistics from PwC that called wealth management the lowest tech industry in the world. Well, pretty much in business, which is not surprising to those of us that work in wealth management. So something needed to happen to drive adoption. And someone at one of the large banks in the US said to me last week, if it wasn't for COVID-19, we would really be behind in digital adoption. So this has really pushed people to the point where they need to use digital tools, both for communications and then for portfolio management, and really get on the stick to catch up with even other financial services industries, which we might think are laggard.
I think absolutely right. I think it comes a lot down to like, how do you demonstrate your value for your client? That hasn't changed much now as it has to before the situation emerged. You always have to justify, and demonstrate the value for your client. And I think then specifically the current situation it is around, okay, how do you, communicate more? How transparent are you with your information? How accessible is that information for your clients? And that you also, I guess, given how disrupted all of the work environments are, that you enable self-servicing for your clients. A lot of these things have to do with digital technology and digital ways of working. And I don't like the take that there's a benefit to a pandemic coming around, because I think it's a bit morbid to say that. But then. But then, if you look for a silver lining, yes, the realization, that's probably, that's a positive, but of course not in the context. It's good to have that motivation either way.
Yeah, of course not. But something needed to happen to really push, and hopefully it'll be client benefits that'll come out of this, where the advisors will be more transparent, as you said, with portfolio, with communications, with what's happening in the markets. Here, the average age of the advisor is around 60 years old. So people are aging
Sorry,
out.
back up. The average age of it is 60 years old.
60 years old, and maybe even a couple of years older. So the majority of wealth managers are aging out. So there's a lot of gaps with why people are thinking that digital adoption hasn't happened in wealth management. And it may not be so much the age, but it might be that that they are also accustomed to living off of their book of business, and they're not that interested in making any changes because everything has worked, as much as it has, and status quo seemed to work. So sometimes it takes something this disruptive, and I totally agree. I'm not advocating for it, but it takes this disruptive to really force change in an industry that's rooted in a lot of old-fashioned ways.
Absolutely, that's crazy. I'm still shocked at that. That's thanks, Dave, but that's going to stick with me. That one of those facts. Well, as Nicolai wants to keep this nice and morbid, I think it was Michael Burry that said at the start of the pandemic that if this pandemic takes a hold, we could see, and again somewhat morbidly, the largest distribution of wealth that we've ever seen. If this occurs at scale, what are some of the biggest kind of different shifts in demands between some of the between generations?
Yeah, I think the generational wealth transfers is happening either way, and thankfully it has less to do with a tragic but still statistically insignificant number of deaths. Thankfully, of course. So that's taking place regardless. I think what's very interesting is actually one of the base assumptions always was that with a lot of digital offerings, that would be a main differentiator of the uptake, between the age groups, for example. The digital offerings are primarily for millennials and younger audiences. And actually, interestingly enough, even at our own proposition, the B2C proposition that we run, Exo Investing, we see that the average age is somewhat in the upper 40s actually. So it's really, and that is actually quite obvious if you think of how the positioning of this value proposition is established. We go after a more financially savvy, knowledgeable audience, and that matters much more for who comes onto your platform than just it being digital and then being accessible or interesting for a younger audience. I think the core aspect is how do you build value and whom do you build the value for, and then digital is just it's almost the base assumption that needs to be there. It's a given assumption by now because of how we consume so many other services. So it's not a differentiating factor by itself, absolutely. So I think and then for a younger audience, the main differences are three. For me, it's the three lesses, as we call them always. It's less knowledge, less trust, or less funds. You have either of those three, or sometimes in a combination, all three of them actually. You know less about investing, you have less experience with it, you have less trust in a provider that you don't know yet or have not yet established a relationship with, and you just have less money. So a traditional high net worth geared approach might not be appropriate for you. So these will be, I think, in these three areas. How do you then build a proposition that addresses these three factors? That's the main difference. But of course, paired with a great digital user experience.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree, Nicolai. I think one of the mistakes that either traditional wealth management firms or robo or hybrid make is thinking that millennials are the only segment that are really interested in digital. And there are plenty of reports that you can look at, including Capgemini World Wealth Report, where the highest appetite for digital is among ultra high net worth boomers. And why? Because they have crossed the Rubicon on all the issues that you've spoken about. They have money, they know digital, and they're pretty savvy in terms of their investments. So I think that is a trend that we can expect to see also. And with regard to your question, Ali, about millennials, I think one of the things that we can see in wealth management is sort of a drive back to the balance sheet. So I think that you're going to see some millennials and some people really going back to wanting to bank with some of the larger firms, have investments in some of the blue chip stocks, as this is the first sort of tragic event that millennials have seen. I mean, post 2008, many millennials felt, a run away from some of the larger financial institutions. And I think now is the time for them to really partner up with fintechs, because I think that combination is going to be, very attractive to many investors and then end clients as well.
Absolutely. I obviously, quite anecdotally, it's interesting hearing from some of my team. For example, one of my team, they were playing around a bit with cryptocurrencies. As soon as lockdowns and people started kind of sort of moving out the office, he liquefied all of that and moved everything onto, as you said, blue chip. A lot sort of safer assets. What are some of the things that you guys are obviously hearing and seeing at the moment? Are people liquefying their assets? Are people kind of moving things to traditionally safer stores of wealth?
There's this saying that during bear markets, stocks return to their rightful owners. So there's some truth to it. Like the ability to hold and to have the nerves to hold assets in a downturn of 20, 30, maybe more %. That's in a lot of cases what differentiates the people who are actually long-term and should also be long-term invested in equities and in the stock market. And the same goes for crypto with an even higher volatility. I think you need to be aware of situations like this coming up, and then you need to be able to stomach what it takes to go through them. And also with us, we're coming back to our own B2C proposition. We see account closures, we see withdrawals, readjustment of risk profiles, most of all actually, more than, or we would have expected more closures and withdrawals, but we actually see more people just sticking to the proposition but readjusting their risk. And that's normal and it's expected as well. And there's a lot of uncertainty around the current volatility, and I think, but this situation is as normal as a 10-year bull market is. It's not very normal, So I think personally we will see more volatility. There will be more downturns. I don't think the lows are in yet. But I also think that the COVID-19 pandemic is probably more of a trigger for a longer overdue systematic imbalance correction. Very cheap credit, very high valuations, paired with very low inflation for a very long time. All of those things together, they don't go too well for too long normally. So I think that there's more coming actually.
I agree with Nicolai. If you think about it from those of us who are older than millennials, and we've seen these markets come and go, that's one thing because we can believe it and we understand it. But I think for younger investors, there's an opportunity for wealth managers to really connect with them and provide some education around this volatility so that they can understand it's part of a natural cycle and we're in a dip and maybe stocks are even cheap now and on sale, and they should be thinking about it in that way rather than liquefying their assets and going to cash now. So I think it's a real opportunity for wealth managers to get out there and talk to clients and provide education to them on just where we are and what it means for long-term investing.
And when you say talk to clients, the very kind of sort of cliche view of a wealth manager, you got the swanky wooden panels, the impressive suit and the pen. Can that really work with everyone sort of working from home for the kind of ultra high net worth individuals? What's the story there? Can that work still?
So I love that question because maybe that becomes sort of the bonfire of the vanities where clients really get to know their advisors because they're working from home and they're seeing how they live and they're seeing them in a more authentic way. I just cut my hair this morning. So getting to know people, we all know that wealth management is a real people business, and getting to know the people that you're working with is important. And I think this provides an opportunity to get to know the people you're working with and to create better relationships and better, stickier long-term relationships for those wealth managers that can do it. For those people who can't do it, I think it'll be a real turning point for their clients to find, if they are using in-person advisors, to find people who can really relate to them and do provide that level of authenticity and transparency. So we're at a real marketing moment, I would say.
I envy your boldness, April, for cutting your own hair. I haven't gotten around to be that brave, but I certainly miss my hairdresser a lot. That I have to say. But we all do, I'm sure. Yeah. I think the situation, and I think within wealth management we see as much of the business on the top and sweatpants on the bottom as we see everywhere else. They just thinking of the image you need to portray when it comes to the means of working now. But then I think it's especially tough for wealth managers right now because they're kind of in a double squeeze. And on the one hand, the workplace routines are heavily disrupted, and like everyone else is with remote working and juggling family life with getting work done. And then the primary good or the primary value to create, which is increasing returns or positive returns, that's in rather short supply at the moment. So you have this double imbalance of a heavily stressed work environment and a heavily stressed outer market environmental factors on top of it. So and it's really what April said I think is very important. Now I don't think it's the time to think about new business creation. I think it's the time to think about, also, much to the detriment of our firm, big innovation projects or big technology projects. Right now, it's focusing on trust and establishing and maintaining the trust with the people you have. And that needs to be the number one key. And hopefully, of course, you have the tools in place to do that and to do it well. Again, it involves a certain set of technology capabilities, but that's something that's probably deliverable at some level.
I think what it's doing right now is providing the biggest stress test we've ever seen before. And I think it'll swing back for obviously businesses like Nicolai's, because firms will realize that this stress test has really shown where the gaps are, what they can do internally, what they can't do internally, what sorts of relationships they need to have. And I think what is also a really great outcome from this unfortunate pandemic is that those wealth managers who are only providing, as Nicolai was saying, returns for their clients will find themselves, I think, sorely out the door. And wealth managers that offer more than just investment returns, but other sorts of advice and services to their clients will find their business really stickier as well and become advisors in the true sense to their clients rather than just portfolio managers.
Absolutely. I think well, you hit the nail on the head there. There's a slight element of it's not just about the black and white figures that return, it's about that trust and about communicating. I know we've all received probably a lot of emails from companies that we've completely forgotten about saying, just letting you know in this difficult time, we're here for you. I received one from a swordsmith and I kind of thought, what? But
domestic problems maybe.
But that was kind of a bit by the by. But then at the same time, I've also had some very directed and very authentic kind of responses as well. We had the guys from Capital on Tap on here, but before even we had them on, I'd been receiving kind of sort of updates from them saying, "Hey, just letting you know, we want to put this forward for you. We're working on it." So I think there's that level of authenticity that goes a long way, especially in wealth.
I think it could be. I mean, I've seen a lot of canned messages to myself as if I need to hear. So I've found a lot of retailers, I guess I've done business with over the years, and they've all updated me on their COVID-19 policy as if I needed to know what it was and I needed to know what it was now. So I think there's a real opportunity for firms at the enterprise level and then wealth managers at the person level to really forge their own relationships and figure out what their clients want to hear and need to hear from them at this point in time. And I think those that get beyond the canned messages and beyond the mass emails will really benefit from this downturn.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, because one of the key aspects is that it doesn't feel canned, and that has to do with tailoring, specificity, and creating individual offerings that are specific to the individual, because that's also something we're used to in a lot of other aspects when we consume services. You think of travel, think of entertainment, think of media generally. It's extremely specific, it's extremely tailored, and sometimes curated, but sometimes curated unobtrusively by our behavior without us actively actually doing it. So transferring it to wealth management or financial advice, if you're able to, again, either by means of technology or by means of you being proactive about it, specifically address your individual clients' needs, you're far ahead of the curve of especially what you said, of how we see restaurants reaching out to us that we went to 5 years ago, and that doesn't seem authentic or relevant at all. It's almost laughable. And I've seen, on Twitter, on other social media platforms, you see people making jokes about it, and it just shows how useless it is.
Absolutely. Well, the final thing I kind of want to touch on is, what should wealth managers be doing today that they aren't to prepare for a post-COVID world?
So to me, there's a couple of things. I called it sort of stop, look, and listen. It's a great time for them to take stock of their own marketing and their own personal brand, to take a look at what their websites might look like, their properties might look like, how they're executing, what platforms they're using to deliver solutions to their clients. And they can even use this opportunity to connect more closely with clients by asking them and engaging them in this sort of self-evaluation process. So I think this is a unique opportunity for wealth managers to sort of hit pause and take a look at what they're doing and think about what they want to be doing in the future. So that's what I would say is a tremendous opportunity that we often don't have, which is sort of a pause button to take a look and reflect on ourselves and how others might see us.
Yeah, I think generally it's has a lot to do, of course, think 10 years ahead and not only 3, what I would say a lot. And that actually even relates to a scenario like we see today, because we had a 10-year bull market where it was very comfortable. If you haven't made money the last 10 years with your business, how are you going to make money in an environment that is not a 10-year streak of upward returns, where it's quite it's not trivial, but it's easier to generate a positive picture for the end client, of course. So, and then market downturns are a normal thing. The current combination of factors is not normal by any stretch, but market downturns, even prolonged, are normal. There's business cycles and they exist. So to prepare for that and be able to still create value for these peers, I think that should be paramount to your business. And again, coming back to the tech adoption and the inertia when it comes to that, I think that there's a fundamental mindset change that needs to happen. I get the pushback, I get how robo as a term also, I think, has done a bit of a disservice to the industry, because it really sounds like the robot replacing the human, and it's nothing that a face-to-face and human relationship business driven business like wealth management should want. So I get that, and I get the pushback, but to maybe shift the mentality and look not towards robot, but look at digital advice and what can that be, and what could that look like, and how could it help my business or my work. I think that's what we need. And then, because you have to embrace the possibilities, like it's not going to go away. And the main threat is not a robo platform like Nutmeg or Wealth Simple. The main threat is an incumbent being ahead of you, or maybe Amazon or Facebook or Apple being ahead of you. That's the threat.
Or yourself. If you haven't updated yourself, that was the point I was sort of driving at. You could stand in your own way.
Of course.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, guys. I feel I've learned a lot about wealth management in general, and a couple of nice little nuggets that stick in your back of the brain that I'm going to be bringing out for months to come. Nicolai, where can we find out more about you guys?
Well, yeah, Nucoro.com. So our website, nucoro.com. This is where we have most of our information. It always lags a bit behind, so it's if you want, because we don't touch the website always with the latest thinking. So if you of course want to speak to us, reach out to us on LinkedIn. Everywhere we are happy to speak to everyone interested in digital innovation in this space.
Excellent. And April, we're going to be seeing you at which event soon?
The kitchen event shortly. You'll see me at when I make another cup of coffee. But you can reach me at april@therudingroup.com, or check out our website, www.therudingroup.com, or find me on all sorts of social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.